Social Security, do they get a
Yep,
check? Logistics, how we're going to get the checks and
right,
when, and
right.
that you might not know, and that's okay if you don't know the exact
No,
timing.
actually, they've already started sending them out, and they have to actually get them, according to the legislation, they actually have to distribute them by January 15th.
Oh,
So if you're
wow.
not on the list by January 15th, the only way you can claim it at this point is to file a tax return.
Wow. Okay. And then and then we'll go into what I emailed you about originally, which is just what if you're still waiting? You haven't got your
Sure,
first one,
right.
and I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Oh, and then maybe you could talk a little bit about what happens if two parents both want to claim a dependent. Is the answer just you get a lawyer and
Yeah, that's usually probably the safest way. Uh, so,
because that will be a that's a legal battle, right?
right,
Essentially.
right, absolutely.
All right.
And then
Uh,
I don't know if Veronica had sent you, I sent her just so you had it as background if you need to refer to it. The IRS has a couple of links on their sites to track your stimulus payments and stuff like that. They've updated them in a couple of pages. They were updated as of today. Other ones they're still working on, and I'm sure they're going to update it shortly.
I have not sent it, but I will send it to you, Evan. I think that might be a valuable resource if you wanted to link, if you have an online counterpart to the story.
Will do. Yes.
That you could link to those.
And I'm looking here. I'm trying to decide whether to keep it as all four of us visible or just you.
Okay.
I think we'll start like this, and then once we get into it, because they'll still be able to see me up here. So these are the very important decisions.
That's right.
So in a pandemic, any plans for the New Year's, or just, I guess, at home, huh?
At home, safe and sound. What about you?
I actually will be with my sister and her husband and their neighbors. So
in a pandemic, 5 is a party.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we're gonna ring in the new year together like we do every year.
All right, so they're telling me they're ready to go.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna tell them to give me a count, and then we'll just get started.
Great.
And then, yep, Veronica, you're already muted. Cool. All right. Okay, we're coming about 5 seconds.
Okay.
All right. Hello, Facebook. My name is Evan Koslof from the Verify team, and we have some guests here today. We'll let people gather in for just a moment, but in the meantime, Henry, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, Evan. My name is Henry Grzes. I'm a lead manager on the AICPA's tax practice and ethics team.
AICPA, that is
the American Institute of Certified Professional Accountants.
There you go. So you're the person that people go to get answers about everything that has to do with accounting, huh?
Well, that might be a stretch, but sure. The AICPA represents hundreds of thousands of CPAs throughout the country, and those individuals are great resources for taxpayers.
So we decided to do this because we did a story the other day about the stimulus checks, and then our inbox just got flooded. We had hundreds, literally hundreds of emails in just a couple of days. So we wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about some of the biggest questions. If people at home have questions, send it to us. We'll make sure that we ask Henry about them. But maybe we'll just start with the basics. Who gets the check, and how big will the checks be?
Sure. So this time around, the checks are a little smaller. They're $600 per person. So it's $1,200 for a couple, assuming it was a joint filing. And then if you have a qualified individual as a dependent, you'd also be able to claim a $600 for those individuals. Now, there is an income threshold associated with that qualification, and it depends if you were single. That starts out at anyone with an adjusted gross income from their 2019 tax return of $75,000 or less. And then there's a phase out so that once that single individual gets to an AGI of 87,000, they wouldn't be eligible for any stimulus payment. There's also higher thresholds for a married joint filing. That's 150,000 as the baseline. So anything below that on a joint return, you'd be able to get the full 1,200. And then that phases out over time until you get to 174,000.
So the full $600 check is for 75,000 if you're single.
Single, correct?
Or at least were in 2019 when you filed.
Correct. That's correct.
And then 150,000 for a couple.
That is correct.
And we should have, and then that was one important point. We should emphasize it's for 2019. How does that work?
Yeah,
it's
so
not
it's
based on right now, right?
Right. It's based on your filing status for 2019. So if you were single in 2019 and then got married in 2020, each individual, assuming that they would ordinarily qualify, would get their own individual stimulus payment. If you were married in 2019 and were single in 2020, then it's still based on the 2019 tax return.
Okay, and everybody at home, keep sending in questions. We'll try to answer them as you send them here. I want to talk about dependents because we did a story on that, I think 2 days ago, and that triggered a lot of questions because there's an age requirement here, right? What is that?
Correct. So it's a individual who was under 17 as of the end of 2019. So it's based on the 2019 filing. So if you had a dependent who was under 17 on that 2019 return and you meet the dependency thresholds, obviously more than 50% support, and that individual lived with you more than 50% of the time in 2019, then you're going to be eligible for an additional $600 per dependent.
So to be a dependent, you need to basically live with the parent or guardian more than 50% of the time, and you need to get at least half of their support from them.
That is correct.
But then if you're 17 or above, you're not going to be counted. You're not going to get
17 or above, you're generally, you can still be claimed as a dependent on your parent's return. It's just that you're not going to qualify for this amount. So the folks who might get the short end of the deal are those individuals with kids away in college. Obviously, ordinarily anyway, they'd be over 16 by the time they're in college and wouldn't ordinarily qualify.
Looking at some of these comments here, we had Vicky saying, my 20-year-old that was going to college and is still unable to find a job because of the epidemic. She didn't receive anything for that daughter. And so, yeah, if you're a high school senior, perhaps, or a college student that's still a dependent, you're not going to be, your parent or guardian won't get 600.
That is correct.
And then this applies to adult dependents as well. We have got a comment from Teresa who said, I'm 61 years old. My daughter claimed me on her taxes. I did not receive the last round. And she wants to know if she's going to get 600.
She's not. That's just the way the law was written.
Yeah.
And you know, the legislation that was proposed that doesn't look like there's going to be any action on it. They were going to change those rules and allow adult dependents and those individuals in that maybe 17 and up category to qualify. But it doesn't look like there's going to be any traction at this point.
Here's a question that we discussed yesterday. What about if you had a baby in 2020? First off, congratulations. You had a baby.
Exactly.
But
You're
at the
very
time-
brave. You're very brave to bring a child into this world in 2020. But you are able to claim it now because the initial outlay of money is going to be based on the 2019 return, and obviously the child wasn't born until 2020. You'd still be able to claim that amount. You'll be able to get it, but in order to do so, you're going to reflect that child on your 2020 tax return. And when that tax return is filed, there is a place for you to provide the information so that that would be ultimately added to your refund.
Okay. I just got a text from someone on our team. She's taking questions and then sending them.
Sure.
To me. She wants to know, Donna Perry wants to know, do we pay taxes on stimulus checks?
No, that is not taxable income. And as a matter of fact, that if you owe, let's say your wages have been garnished or you have some other withholding of funds, that would not be subject to that type of withholding.
Okay. And Donna, I apologize, it's Donna Petrie, not Donna Perry. So that was a good question from Donna right there. What about if you were a dependent, but then in 2020, you became an independent, you filed your own, or you're going to file your own taxes? What then? Because you would not have received your $600, or your parents would not have received based on 2019.
That's correct. So, you know, if you were claimed, let's say you graduated from college in 2019, went out into the workforce, they claimed you because you were dependent for the first 5 months of the year, but you go to file your 2020 return and you're independent of them, you'd be able to claim that amount on the 2020 return and get credit for it. It's just that it won't be coming to you independent of filing a tax return.
Right. So you won't be getting a check now.
Correct.
But come tax time, you should be able to get that money back.
That is correct. Assuming you meet the income thresholds and all the other requirements.
Great. And we did get some comments on that. Jabri sent us an email saying, if I was claimed as dependent by a parent in 2019, but I've been caring for myself in 2020, am I eligible? And Lakeisha had a similar question, but she mentioned SSI. So this is a good transition into Social Security. And
sure. So
you
know, SSI recipients, they are all, they would be eligible to receive the payments also. Once again, meeting those other thresholds of income and what have you. So you could have an individual who is retired, let's say, getting VA benefits or SSI income, as long as they don't exceed the income threshold, the adjusted gross income threshold, then they should be able to receive the funds.
Okay, good question there. We just got a new one. This just came in. We don't have a name yet, but it's what happens if you get the 600 stimulus check and then Congress were to pass the $2,000 check, which at this point they have not. Right. What happens then?
So what's going to happen is that, assuming it does play out that way, then the IRS is going to try to get that money out as quickly as possible. Because it's still a hypothetical. The specifics around that, maybe they would allow you to claim that additional amount on your tax return when you file the return. That has yet to be determined. But if they do get to 2,000, you'll get the money. It's just the logistics as to how you're going to get it at this point in time is up in the air.
So if the $600 already got deposited, you might then get $1,400.
Correct. Yep.
And again, this is hypothetical because
right.
No bill has passed
right.
at this point.
Yeah. Generally, what happens is that if you've got the ability for the IRS to transfer those funds to you electronically, like you did in the first round, they'll come to you the same way for the second round of payments. For those individuals who received a paper check, because the IRS didn't have a bank account information for them, then they would most likely get a paper check. Or, some people receive them on a debit card. And, the chances are you're probably gonna, if you've got a debit card the first time, they're gonna send you another one.
And Donna Petrie came in on that topic, I believe. If we use direct deposit for a return last year, how soon? It's slightly different. If we use direct deposit on a return last year, how soon should we be able to look for the stimulus to arrive?
The IRS and Treasury started transferring the money earlier this week, and I know of some folks who have already been identified that there's either a pending deposit in their account or it's already there. So if they have that, now the challenge that you're going to face is that if you had somebody who filed a tax return and gave the IRS 2000 on their 2019 return and then subsequently changed their bank account, close that account out, then there isn't enough time for you to go in and advise the IRS of a change in account, and you're going to have to claim that second one on your tax return.
So they're going to try to find you where they know there's the place to deposit the money, basically.
Right. And if they attempt to transfer it to a closed account, it's obviously going to bounce back to them.
Linda Collins Minton has a great question, one that a lot of people are wondering. How do I check to see if I'm actually going to get the $600? Where can somebody go?
Okay, so the IRS has some great tools on their website, irs.gov. Now they're in the process of being updated, but it allows you to put information in as to what your income is and also to check the status of the payments. So, and they're updating it now for the new rules, but you enter some basic information in those sites and they will be able to tell you if the check was mailed, let's say, and you never received it, or if they required more information or they didn't have a valid address for you. And so that's the best way to do it. Calling the IRS probably isn't the way to go. But the tools themselves, once they are up and functional, is a great way of tracking stuff down.
Yeah, they're very busy right now. When the media tries to track them down for comment, sometimes it takes a while for them to get back to us. So when they've got hundreds of thousands of people,
exactly.
It might be difficult. Here's a question. Somebody asked, will you get stimulus if you owe child support?
No, once again, you will, put it this way, you will get the check. It will not be garnished for child support.
So won't be taxed, won't be garnished. That's
right.
Basically the headline here.
That's correct.
Okay, another question similar to what we've been talking about. And for people that are just joining us, I'm Evan Koslof from the Verify team. We've gotten hundreds of emails from people who have questions about these stimulus checks. So we brought in the expert, Henry Grzes, and he's going to talk a little bit about your biggest questions right now. So here's another question. Somebody said, if you got a paper check last time, will you get a paper check this time?
Chances are you will. The IRS hasn't come out and said that, but I think it's reasonable to assume that if you got a paper check last time, you'll get a paper check this time.
Why is that? Just because last time they didn't have a direct deposit, and so
correct, didn't have bank account information and what have you. Now, it's quite possible that you got a paper check the first time, you then subsequently filed your 2019 return, and you provided bank account information on that return. Now you may be getting it automatically deposited into the account because now the IRS has a way to make that electronic deposit.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about mixed status families. There were rumors that undocumented immigrants were receiving checks. I talked with you, I believe. That's not the case. What's going on here?
Yeah, so in the first go around, what had to happen is that if an individual was filing a joint return, both spouses had to have valid Social Security numbers in order for them to qualify. In this second round, and they've made it retroactive to the first round, only one spouse has to have a valid Social Security number. Now, those individuals could be in the US for a valid reason, they don't have the right to work, but let's say the spouse of a U.S. citizen, they would have the ability to now claim those, both the first and the second one under this new law. Same thing with the kids, that if one parent has a valid Social Security number and these are qualifying children and the kids have Social Security numbers, they would be also able to qualify.
But to be clear though, the undocumented immigrant would not be the one to get the check. So
that is correct, because the starting point is U.S. citizens and resident aliens, so green card holders, permanent residents of the U.S. If you're a non-resident alien, the U.S. isn't a permanent place of abode for you, so you're not eligible for that credit, the check.
So if you're in a mixed status household, the citizen or green card holder will get $600, and
Correct.
for your children who are also citizens, they would also get $600.
That is correct.
Lots of people saying they've gotten the check. So
There you
that's
go.
not a question, it's just a
No.
comment, and that's very good news. Aubrey Arnold has a great question, which is something that I was hoping to transition to. What if you didn't get the first one? What do you do?
So what happened is that when they rolled this out the first time, there were some hiccups. They had obviously individuals who don't have a filing requirement, haven't had a filing requirement because their income level is such. There was an opportunity for you to go onto the IRS website, provide information. Now that period to do that expired, I believe, on the 21st of November. So now what you need to do is file a 2020 income tax return. That's at this point in time. And I'm not sure it's going to change because of the fact that they have that January 15th cutoff. I don't think that there's going to be enough time to do what the IRS did last time, where they allowed people who weren't filing to provide the information so they could get the check. So right now, the only way to obtain that both first and second round, if you haven't gotten it yet, is to claim it on your 2020 income tax return.
So you shouldn't be waiting at your mailbox for that check from the first round. You're going to have to, in the next tax session, file for that money that you're owed. Is that right?
Correct. And what was supposed to happen, and it's supposed to happen with this also, is that within 14 days after the IRS either mails you the check or mails you the debit card or deposits those funds, you're supposed to be getting a letter saying, we have sent X dollars to you based on whatever amount you were entitled to receive. Now, there are cases where checks were lost in the mail or potentially stolen or something to that effect. An individual gets the letter but never got the money. So that's when they would report that on their individual return, and that's when you'd probably want to connect with the IRS, because there's going to be back and forth on that. Let's say somebody stole the check, it was cashed for whatever reason, you never got the money, you're going to claim it on your return. The IRS is going to say, wait a minute, we sent you the $600, you cashed the check, and then you have to obviously demonstrate that you never received the funds.
And specifically, this is the recovery rebate credit, right? When you're filing your taxes, it's on your 1040 form, like most of us fill out.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Right. It's so it's on the form itself. I believe it's line 30 on the form this year. The forms have been released. The instructions themselves are still in draft form and are about to be released. But what would happen? So let's say, since this is a 2020 credit, and we talked about having a child in 2020. So you and your spouse had no kids in 2019. You got your first round of checks, you got your second round of checks, but in 2020, you had a child. So now you're going to be able to claim the credit for that child on your 2020 income tax return. Obviously, you can't claim yourself again because you already got the money for yourself and your spouse, but the new addition to your family, you'd be able to claim.
So we have a lot of people joining us on Facebook. Hello, everybody. I'm Evan Koslof from the Verify team. And right now we're answering your questions about stimulus checks because we did a story a few days ago and they've just been pouring in. We brought in an expert. This is Henry Grzes, and he's the expert on everything accounting. He might be humble and say that he's not, but he is. So please send in your questions on Facebook. We've seen a lot of questions about dependents. Sherry Hickman just asked us, will you get a stimulus if someone claimed you on their taxes and you get SSI? We talked about this earlier. Unfortunately, the answer is
If
no,
you're
right?
claimed, yeah, if you're claimed on someone else's return as a dependent, you're not going to qualify.
Right. And this is, why don't we go back into details about that for everybody that's joining us?
Sure.
What dependents are going to get that extra 600?
So the individuals who qualify for this second round are similar to what was the first round. So the individual had to be, it's based on 2019 tax filings. So if the dependent was 16 years old or younger at the end of 2019, they would qualify, assuming the parents met the income thresholds, that they didn't exceed those income thresholds. You could be obviously under 16, but if your parents are over the income threshold, then you're not going to receive anything.
And so this means that there are a lot of dependents who will not be getting the additional $600 if you were 17 on your 2019 tax.
Correct. You could still be living at home, or you could be away at university. That's deemed to be a temporary. But if your parents are still claiming you as a dependent on their return, you're not going to qualify.
And to put a point on it, that includes adult dependents.
That is correct. So many situations, parents are now living with their children. The children are supporting their parents. Those adults would not qualify for the stimulus checks, either in the first round or the second round.
Here's a question. So what if two parents want to claim a dependent? They're both trying to say that they deserve that $600. What happens in that situation?
So you have a situation where it's going to be based on support. So one parent has to provide more than 50% of support, and then the parent has to, or the dependent has to be living with the one parent more than 50% of the times. Now, you sometimes get into a contentious situation when a relationship is dissolving, and oftentimes that is handled through any type of separation agreement or a divorce decree, where it would specifically state who is entitled to the dependency exemption.
So it's when lawyers get involved, not to make
lawyers get involved. That's correct.
Light of it, but yeah. Here's a question from Brandon McLemore. I hope I pronounced that right. Saying, why have some already gotten theirs and some, it doesn't even show that it's pending or anything?
Once again, they're rolling this out. I don't know in what order necessarily they're getting it. I think I'd feel pretty confident if I got the first round already. Now, if you don't have it by now, let's say because the first round was based on both 2018 and 19 returns. And let's say you didn't file your 2019 return by the time the first round was sent out. So you qualified based on that 2018 filing. Now you filed that 2019 return, and because the second round is based on your 2019 return, maybe you don't qualify based on the 2019 return. Now, if your income goes down in 2020 and now you qualify, you're going to be able to claim that on your 2020 return.
Great. And we've got a lot of people coming in right now. You've already given us a half hour of your time. It's time flies when you're having fun, I guess. I was hoping maybe we could return to the basics for the people that just came in. Big picture, how big are these checks and who qualifies?
Right. So a big picture, the checks are $600 per individual. You have a joint filing. So that would be 2 times 600, so 1,200. And then there's $600 for each qualifying child as a dependent. So it's a filing status, so single, married filing joint, or head of household. Those are the 3 basic ones. And then you're going to have an income test associated with this. So if you're a single individual and your 2019 return reflects an adjusted gross income of $75,000 or less, you're going to be able to get the full $600 payment. There is a phase out so that if once your income gets over the threshold, you're not going to be able to claim anything. You'd get a reduced amount if you fall in between those levels. So for instance, you have somebody who's a single individual on their 2019 return, you get the full 600 if it's 75,000 or less, but if you're over 87,000, you get nothing. And then if your income is in between the two, then you're going to get a partial amount. And then there are higher thresholds. 150,000 is the full amount for a joint return. And then once the AGI gets to 174,000 on the 2019 return, you wouldn't be entitled to any. And then for dependents, you have individuals who were 16 years old or younger on their parents' 2019 return. They would be eligible for an additional $600 for any of those qualifying children.
And we should emphasize, like you were just saying, it's based on 2019 tax filings.
Correct.
So it's not, they're not necessarily getting a snapshot of right now where you are, but where you were when you filed your 2019.
Well, right. So that's sort of their baseline, and you can basically true that up. So as we talked earlier, if you had a child in 2020, obviously that child wouldn't be reflected on your 2019 tax return, but you'd be able to get the stimulus payment for that child when you file your 2020 tax return, assuming once again that you meet the income threshold criteria.
Okay, and the questions keep coming in about dependents.
Yes.
So let's talk, because it's real money, and it's real
Yep.
money that people won't be receiving this year. What's the rule?
So the rule is that you have an age test. So it's individuals 16 years old or less as of the end of 2019. You have the support test that the individual has to be living, you have to be providing more than 50% of support to that individual. That would obviously cover food and clothing and housing, et cetera, et cetera. And then also that individual has to be living with you more than 50% of the time. Now, if someone is away at school, boarding school, or something to that effect, that's deemed to be a temporary absence. So even though they may not be physically in your residence, they are deemed to be living with you.
So, but if you're a dependent, meaning your parent or guardian, you pass the residency test and the support
Yep.
test.
Yep.
If you're 17 and up, your parents can't claim.
You're out of luck. You're out of luck. And the only way is if you had those individuals who were away. Let's say they graduated from college in 2019. They were claimed on their parents' 2019 return because they spent the spring semester away. They were supported, and now they're on their own. They would be able to claim their individual check on their 2020 return because they'd be independent of their parents for the 2020 tax year.
If you're 18 now, might it be a good idea to file as an independent next year, or do you get to choose?
You have to, you have to demonstrate that you truly are dependent of your parents. Now, state laws are going to rule. So if you emancipate from your parents, you could be deemed to be independent of them. It's quite possible that you could be there, you meet the tests, sure, you could qualify for that. But, just to say, well, I'm going to file a tax return for my 10-year-old child just so he or she, because mom and dad make too much money, but if I file a tax return for my 10-year-old child, but there's really no income on it, you're going to have a hard time trying to support an additional check for that individual.
We've got a great question, one
Okay.
I've not thought about, from Bob Keeb. He says, if you qualify for payment in 2019, but not in 2020, will you have to pay back on the 2020 tax return? That would not be fair.
No, you will not. So this would allow, because it's kind of strange. They use 2019 as a baseline, but it's really, you can adjust it on to 2020. So we talk about the fact that you had a child who was born in 2020, you're going to be able to claim the additional check for that individual. You have somebody who's 16 in 2019, but in 2020 they're 17, they wouldn't qualify. You don't have to pay that back.
So filing the tax return, you could get money back that you did not receive in the check, but you're not going to have to give away money that you maybe
correct.
didn't need in the check.
That's correct.
That's good news right there. Let's see, we've got a few questions here. Okay, what happens if, similar question, what happens if you filed jointly in 2019, but then your spouse passed away in 2020? Will you still get the $1,200?
So as long as the individual was alive as of January 1, 2020, they would be eligible for the full 1,200, 600 each. So if an individual died in 2019, there was a problem the first go round. I'm sure your listeners and viewers probably read about, where because the IRS didn't have initial access to the Social Security Administration records, people who died in 2019 were getting checks. And then what was happening is the IRS got that information, and let's say it was a joint check that was issued, they voided the entire joint check, even though one person was still eligible, so they had to reissue the checks in the name of the individual. This second go around, the IRS has access to that information, so there's less likely somebody who died in 2019 is going to get a check.
Okay, so they probably won't get the check. They probably,
if they died in 2020, they would. So let's say an individual
you're
died.
saying 2019, they will have
Right, yeah, if they
out.
died in 2019, they wouldn't. But if they died in 2020, obviously based on the 2019 return, got a joint filing, you'd still be eligible. Once again, going back to the income threshold test.
If you receive a $1,200 check for you and your spouse that passed
Yeah.
away, are
Yeah.
you allowed to cash it, or do you need to go and alert the IRS that you've got money? That
Well, what happened is that if you had a check erroneously, you should, you shouldn't be cashing a check for funds that you aren't entitled to. But I think it's less likely that's going to happen the second go round. I know the IRS had tried, let's say you already cashed the check, they sent letters to people saying, we sent you the money, send it back to us. But I'm not sure how many people complied with that request.
Well, you've been very helpful and very patient with your time. We're going on 40 minutes. We'll go a little longer, but
Sure.
I appreciate you being here. The questions keep pouring in. For everybody that's joining us, I'm Evan Koslof from the Verify team. We did some stories on the stimulus checks, and the questions just poured in. We received hundreds of questions in just a matter of days. So we brought in Henry Grzes. Henry, do you mind what is your title? Do you mind sharing?
Sure. I'm a lead manager on the tax practice and ethics team at the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
And we've gone through it a little bit, but I think that since we've got so many people coming and joining us,
Sure.
Let's run through the biggest questions, starting with the basics. So we're looking at $600.
$600 per person. And if you have a married filing joint status, so a couple, that would be $1,200. and then $600 for each dependent, qualifying child as it's known in the legislation. So there's an income threshold to this based on your filing status. So if you're a single individual in 2019, because right now the initial outflow of cash is going to be based on your 2019 tax return filing, and your adjusted gross income is $75,000 or less, you're going to receive the full amount of the stimulus payment of $600. If you make more than 75,000, there's a phase out there until you hit 87,000. At that point in time, you're not eligible for a stimulus payment. If your income falls between the two, you're going to get a prorated portion of that. Married filing joint, the threshold is higher. So as long as the joint return doesn't reflect an adjusted gross income of more than 150,000, you'd be eligible for the full $1,200 worth of payments. And once again, it's phased out until your adjusted gross income exceeds 174,000. At that point in time, you receive none.
And we've talked about the income levels.
Right.
That includes people on Social Security, SSI.
Correct. So, just because you're receiving Social Security payments doesn't mean you're not going to be eligible for this. You look at your tax return. Sometimes Social Security is taxable based on your income level. Sometimes it isn't. If you're receiving Social Security income and you're under these lower thresholds, chances are you're probably going to receive the full amount of the check.
Okay, and then importantly, when are we going to get these checks? And the good news is people have been commenting saying, I already got mine, which is great.
Right.
What's the timetable here?
So the Treasury started transferring funds earlier this week. So if the IRS has the information to do an electronic deposit, either from a prior tax return or if you get your Social Security payments electronically deposited, that should appear in your account within a matter of days. The legislation states that the funds have to be distributed by January 15th, 2021. If you received
it's a quick turnaround. That's very quick.
A very quick turnaround. It's a very quick turnaround. And I think they wanted to get the funds into the hands of the people as quickly as they possibly could. And given the fact that they've gone through this once already, they're probably able to turn around a little faster that way. But the checks have to be distributed by January 15th. If you received a paper check last time in the first round, it's quite possible that you're going to receive a paper check this time. And oftentimes that's done because the IRS doesn't have bank account information where they can electronically transfer the funds. Some individuals also received a prepaid debit card. And you want to make sure that you don't look at this and just throw it out. That it has happened to people. People would get a letter 2 weeks after the payment, and then they realize, wait a minute, I got this in the form of a prepaid debit card, and I think I threw it out. So you had to work with IRS. They would invalidate that card and reissue you another one.
Elva Booth saying, I live on SSI. What about me? I believe it's the same, right? As
Correct.
long as your income is at the right level.
Right, at the right level. And what initially happened is that in the first go round, there were a lot of people who don't have to file tax returns, but were still getting SSI payments. The IRS made some modifications and then started sending the amounts out to those individuals. So those individuals, even though you don't have a level of income that merits filing a tax return, if you're on SSI, you should be able to get that automatically.
Brenda Robbins asking, what if you change banks?
What if you change banks? That's a bit of a problem. So if let's say you filed your 2019 tax return, you gave them the bank information, you had your 2019 return deposited, and since that point in time you changed banks, the IRS will, they only have that record right now. They're going to try to transfer those funds in. It's going to be rejected. So you'll have to claim it on your 2020 1040.
Okay, we've gotten tons of questions but you've given us 45 minutes of your time, and we're really appreciative. Everybody that's watching, we're still working on this. So if you've got more questions, you can put it in the chat. You can email us at verify@wusa9.com. We've got Henry on speed dial. So if you have questions, let us know, and we'll continue answering. Henry, once again, you want to give your title? It's
once again, I'm Henry Grzes, lead manager with the AICPA's tax practice and ethics team, and happy to provide Evan, you, and your viewers any assistance we possibly can, and wish everyone a healthy and happy 2021.
All right, so that's where the thank you cards go. They go to you, Henry. All right, everybody, thank you for watching, and that's going to be all. We'll turn off our mics and turn off our cameras, and thanks for joining us on the Verify team. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.